Club Pre-Med monthly web chat. We're resuming now, so that's great. We're sort of in a season now when we can do it more regularly, so that's good. I want to also introduce Vanessa, part of the A-team, a valuable member of the A-team, and here to assist with anything that we might need. So it's great to have you all here. It might stay a cozy, smaller group, so that's great for interaction. Okay, you know that we like to be as interactive as possible, so let's do this and unmute so we can say hi the regular way. So unmute.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi.
Hello.
Fine. I see new faces and I see some familiar names and faces, so it's great to have you all here. Vanessa, would you do me a big favor and turn off the doorbell? And we'll get going, okay? We'll get going. The topic for today is something that I haven't done for a long time, and I think it's probably something that you all really want to talk about, and that is shadowing. So let me share my screen and get these things up, and I want to get your smiling faces back in the gallery. There you are. Great. And I'm going to try to follow the chat, but you know I'm not a great multitasker, but Vanessa's watching the chat also. Okay, so there's our little plug for Club Pre-Med. Tell your friends. So I want you to be able to make the most out of it, out of your shadowing experience. Very important, you know, on your path to, on your pre-med path, your path to being a physician. It's something that's essential. I think everybody knows that, right? And I think during the next hour, we can all share some information, not just the questions and answers I might have, but you're going to have some ideas. And I find when we talk about shadowing in groups like this, a lot of people have great ideas. So I want you to please feel free to put your ideas in the chat when it comes time. So I'll just say, some of you have heard me say this before. We all know what shadowing is, right? I think we all know what we mean when we say shadowing, and we're certainly going to learn some more if you don't know right now. I don't like the word because it looks like this guy standing in the doorway. You know, you're back in the shadows. You're supposed to be a shadow. Shadows don't talk. They sit there in the background. So I don't like the word because it needs to be much more active than that. You know, you're really, I like the word apprentice. So a lot of the things I've got for you, you'll see the terminology, the progressive apprentice. So you're learning in stages more and more in your apprenticeship under a physician, learning more and more about what we all do in the medical field. So here's a little bit of the organization. We're going to talk about being prepared for the encounter. We're going to talk about setting goals. We're going to talk about engaging during the encounter and debriefing. Now, not surprisingly, because we know it's sort of an iffy resource sometimes, Student Doctor Network says don't expect too much from your shadowing experience from apprenticing. It doesn't surprise me, but that's really not the way to look at it, right? If you say, okay, don't expect too much, just check it off the checklist. That's the second part of that phrase, don't expect too much and just be checking it off a list. That is not the purpose. The purpose, as in everything you do, planning to be a physician, it's not to check it off a checklist. You need to get something out of it, right? So I will tell you, expect a lot, because I'll help you plan how to get a lot out of it, no matter what the circumstances. So you need to know why we're doing this, finding the experience. Hopefully somebody will have some ideas out there. We'll share some of those, know some etiquette and know HIPAA. So let's talk about preparation. You're gonna be finding out how doctors spend their days. You know, you're going to find out that there's a huge variety of ways that physicians spend their time helping people, helping groups of people, helping doctors to help people. There are just all sorts of things that you can learn in these healthcare experiences, apprenticing, being in the room with a physician. You get a little, I was saying this to somebody recently. When I went to medical school, there was sort of one thing you were going to do. You were going to be a physician, you're going to be a doctor and go into a clinic or hospital work and take care of patients every day. There is a huge variety now of things that you're going to be able to do with your medical degree. You can, work in and for corporations. You can be administrative in that way. You can do academia, you can do research, as well as taking care of patients. So there's so many things, and there's purpose, of course, then in apprenticing for that. You're going to get a glimpse of the art and the science. Lots of people are called to this, right? Because you love the science. Science is so precise. Little tiny details are all in order. Well, you'll learn that there's the art to this is that things just, aren't always textbook, and they don't always fall into place. You have to put the puzzles together. So that art and science is a fun thing to be learning from when you're apprenticing or shadowing. You get to see the practical and the red tape, the hits and the misses, the frustrations, and as well as the rewards of it. And then the types of systems, I don't know if you all realize that, but you can care for somebody in a clinic or care for somebody in a hospital or in an HMO sort of environment. There are all kinds of different systems. We have a county system here where we take care of people. We have, as you all probably know, we have lots of community clinics here. That's a different system in which we work. So you'll get a glimpse of that also. The purpose, maybe the most important thing on this slide, is the purpose of your shadowing experience is not to pick a specialty. I do have people sometimes who say, gosh, I've shadowed a lot and I just, I'm not sure what I want to be, and I can't find the opportunity in blank pediatrics or cardiology. And that's what I think I want to do. So that's really not the purpose. The purpose is all those things that are on top of choosing a specialty. It also, we talk about this sometimes when we're talking about, building everything in your shoebox and those experiences that you do have. It comes out in the personal statement, actually, when somebody writes about wanting to be a pediatric cardiologist, unless you have a bunch of experience, a lot of experience in that area, it's going to look like you're a little bit, not fully informed about things. It's going to look a little bit naive if you're jumping to a specialty. If you have done gap years and or you're a career changer and it was research and it was in a cardiology field with kids, then that makes a lot of sense if you've spent years already there. So just keep that in mind. It's nice to see different specialties, and we can talk about specific questions about that. And it's not something you check off a checklist, right? Everybody knows that. Okay, so I expect, and I do have your questions here that Vanessa pulled for us, so we'll get to those. But I know that there are several people who wanted to know, like, how do I even start? I'm having trouble finding a shadowing experience. We're going to talk about virtual, see if these ideas just aren't happening for you. We have some alternatives that we have learned through the pandemic and everything turning virtual, but I'm going to turn our attention to that a little bit later. Think about some of these things, and please add in the chat if you've got ideas to share with people. You can start with your doctor. You should have a doctor somewhere. Maybe you're, or maybe if you're in school, you can go to the school's clinic, the university health system, and ask, you're a pre-med, can you join them, or join the caregivers sometimes. There are shadowing programs that you can look up in various schools. There are a lot of virtual shadowing programs out there. I'm going to give a plug for Socially Distant Shadowers, and thank them again for inviting me to do one of their sessions. I think we talked about the application and shoebox and stuff. But there are some good things out there on YouTube. There are some pre-med organization groups that maybe some of you have had some experience in. Hospital volunteering is always a great, lots and lots and lots of hospitals have volunteer programs that are resuming now. A lot of things were shut down. These were some of them. So, but getting your foot into the door so you're a worker at a hospital every day puts you in a position to have some access to physicians so that you can approach them. I think I'm going to save that, but job hiring sites, I had a session in El Paso recently, and somebody said they got their experience from a job hiring site, Indeed. And just somebody else look on Facebook, YouTube, find pre-med groups, and then ask or read the threads about what ideas people have come up with for finding these shadowing experiences. Get a job. Doing part-time. There are going to be some responsibilities if you join various groups, but physicist, I'm losing the name of the other one. Physicist is a big one. Robin scribing is virtual asynchronous. So they send you the tapes, and that's at least part of their employment opportunities. They have been around doing that since pre-COVID days. So they're pros at virtual and virtual asynchronous. So you could see what the part-time or even full-time opportunities are there. You could work as a caregiver. I think most admissions committees put high value on caregiving. A patient care technologist or technician is somebody who gives that patient all those days that you're with them, very basic, you fulfill very basic needs that other people might not feel like they want to do. So you're doing a lot of good for people in those caregiving settings. A medical assistant. Now, so I have to put in here the dad factor. You might have access to people in your family who are physicians. So that is excellent. And you can get started with that. But there is I'm not going to remember the exact verse. It's on one of my thousands of slides somewhere, but it's from Luke, and it's something like, to whom much is given, much is expected. So people will expect you to use those opportunities. Some people will just kill to have a family member that they could go to say, do you have friends that, would let me apprentice or shadow in the clinic one day? So when you have a relative who is in the healthcare arena or is a physician, you need to take that a step further and not rely solely on those experiences. We all understand COVID has done a number on, probably has had the most impact on this particular area of your growing journey dossier, right? Your accumulation of experiences. This is probably where it's had the most impact. But still try to be aware of that. I think that another thing you should do filling out your application is be forthright. Come right out there and say, shadowing or apprenticing. You could put apprenticing for, if you're describing the item, you could say shadowing, and I shadowed Dr. Smith, who is my aunt, and she taught me so much and helped me get other connections, even, helped me learn in discussions and things, as well as in the clinic. So sometimes people try to bury that connection, and so they are very carefully constructing that item, but we kind of figure it out that that's your relative. So you might as well go out there, honor them, give them credit for being a role model, and then launch from there. That's the dad mom I used to say dad factor, but it's mom or relative, whoever it is. Let's go back to cold call. I think if we polled the room and what you all have done, if we poll any room, the vast majority of the time, people say, I just went to the doctor's office. I just called people. I just emailed. Now that is a big funnel that has narrow output, which means you might have to do this frequently and to a number of people before you get a positive response. But a lot of people will tell you that they have success that way. I would, if you can, you know, you could call a clinic. I think if you can, you should put some nice professional clothing on, have a 1-page, maybe it needs to be a little more than just your resume. Maybe it needs to be an introductory sort of mini letter at the top saying something about your desire to be a physician, your motivation to learn. And then list some skills. Be sure to include that you know how to act like a professional, you know, and don't ask for the doctor. Don't go in and ask for the doctor. Don't pick up the phone to call a clinic and ask for the doctor. That's part of the system, right? Even private practices have a system, so you can ask for somebody who can help you with this. You're seeking a shadowing experience, and the calls are, that's why going in person is a little bit better, because sometimes they'll bring out the office manager or even the physician if it's a small place, you know, and you could just march, you know, set aside some time to dress up and have some copies of those things so you can present yourself as a professional. And you could even say things like, I'm looking for something on a long-term basis even, or for this whole semester, so I could learn and maybe help out in the office as well with things. I'm a smart person and learn fast, that kind of thing. You know, sell yourself a little bit, but as a short introduction. Okay. And I think that a lot of people find success that way. So good. We have some contributions in the chat. Maybe. So I think so. Sharon is lucky to have somebody close to her in the healthcare arena. And yeah, I think that it's good to be able to launch from there into other things. And Rutabe, I've tried to pronounce your name before, haven't I? How bad was that? Pronounce it for me. Rutabe. Okay, Rutabe.
That's actually right. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Patient care technician. What's PSA?
Patient safety attendant.
Oh, okay, good. Patient safety in a hospital and shadowing an oncologist on the outside.
Yeah.
So I think if this is a long-term activity, I think that looks good. Remember, so back up to application discussions that we've had. You may work as something. Let's say put some initials together, a CNA or something. Okay, maybe a nursing assistant of some sort. We don't know what that entails. We might, when we see those initials or see what they stand for, maybe not understand what you're doing every day or what the value is. We might give it a lower value in our scheme of things. It is up to you. I have learned so much about the value of a variety of healthcare workers, because in an interview setting, I get to say, tell me more about that. Or people have described it very nicely in their personal statement or in the item description, you know. So that to me sounds beautiful. You're really getting hands-on clinical work in that patient care role, and you have shadowed somebody. And I think that apprenticing shadowing thing, another point I would make is that probably every school wants to see at least some of that, you know, where we understand things have changed and then it's hard. But probably everybody wants to see that you've been in a room with a physician. You've heard me say this before, been in a room with a physician who's taking care of patients and their families. So anyway, we can talk about some other more specific things. You have to, I know you all are young professionals and know all this, but I think it bears saying, bears repeating. Go nicely dressed. I think I would pull my hair back. I would dress in a very conservative way. You want to find out, this is all preparation, right? So you want to ask the office manager or the physician what is appropriate dress. Don't say, can I wear scrubs? Okay. Ask what is appropriate to wear. Okay. So that they get to come up with their preference for their dress code in their clinic. You know, be prompt, be early, exchange phone numbers. If you are ill, you do not go, right? And you call as soon as you can to say, I'm so sorry, but I should stay home. And boy, everybody understands that. If we didn't before, everybody really does not want ill people around us, do we? Around our clinics and ourselves. So stay home. That it's interesting, right? So I changed a lot of slides on this. I never give the same talk twice, but it says handshake there, and people are sort of getting away from that. And I think that there are ways to maneuver. You all have had ways to maneuver that handshake awkward thing that happens, right? So sometimes people present an elbow or a fist. Somebody reached out their hand to me yesterday in a and I think it's a little different in a healthcare and clinic setting. And I just waved, like, you know, I've been seeing patients and been around. I'm not going to shake your hand today, but I don't need to say it, because now with COVID, everybody sort of understands that if you're pulling back, and I don't think people feel as awkward about it as we used to. Use titles. I'm going to tell you like a personal preference, and remember, one of my themes is that you need to get advice from all kinds of places. Okay, I'm giving you some good information based on lots of admissions experience, but this is a personal preference of mine. I don't think that we should, in a healthcare setting, call people by their first names until you're invited to do so. And I've had lots and lots and lots of patients, and you know, if they're younger than me, I don't have any problem with that once I'm invited to use their first name. But if it's an older person in my generation, I guess I should say, and for my preference, I call people with their title, Mr. or Ms. or whatever it is. You know, when I'll say, please remind me your name, sometimes people say Danny, and I'll say, Danny who? And then call them, you know, Mr. Smith. So I think that's that's a professional thing to do. So you can see, I think on campuses, don't you all in your school experience, don't you call a lot of people, like professors and teachers, by their first names? No? Okay. Yes. And it depends campus to campus, I'm sure, right? So so remember, now you're coming out of that setting. If it is I think it's a little more casual too. So you're wanting to be a little more formal. So I would say use titles. And here's the other thing. When you do this to me, will you please remind me who you are? Use your first and your last name. Email's no problem, because I'm going to see it there probably in your email address or the signature. But when you're walking in to the clinic, for example, the first times, and you don't say, I'm Donna, you know, say your first and last names. When you're meeting people, when you're meeting the patient and you're saying your name, say your first and your last name. People often just do first names, and that's a thing of mine. Yes. See, so yes, Claire, I feel the same way. Never use first names. Yeah. And Claire's been, you all have the chat up so you can see Claire's contribution. Thank you. So your demeanor, your nonverbal behavior is hugely important. So the way you look, you need to look like a professional and you need to act like a professional. So act engaged, be attentive, and habits. Oh, don't pull your hair, just pull your hair back, you know, put it in a nice ponytail or a bun or something. Don't twirl your hair. Don't, so I'm telling you, you know why I'm telling you these things is because they've happened in my clinic, right? Don't crack your knuckles, or other things. I don't know. I'll think of some more. Just watch any little personal habits that you might have, you know. But do not, oh, where is that? Oh, I guess it's somewhere else. Did I skip it? Maybe I'll just say it again. No, that's that's when we're there. Never mind. I'll come to it. I'll come to some other little pointers. We're going to take a HIPAA detour. Okay, because you should know HIPAA. Vanessa and I might find a way, we could email that too. I have a more formal HIPAA presentation and a certificate. People, you know, it's not, these are all over the place now, and a place where you are apprenticing or shadowing or volunteering. If you're in a hospital program, for example, they're going to want you to take their own HIPAA course. But if it helps with your cold calls, you can call us and Vanessa will send you that PowerPoint. You do the little quiz at the end, and then we'll send you a certificate so you could put, you know, that you received pre-med level HIPAA training at Long School of Medicine, if that helps you. Basically, it's about respect and dignity and professionalism. Okay, you have responsibilities under this federal law. I'm not sure that we needed a federal law to tell us these responsibilities, but we have it. I think mostly it gives patients rights. We have responsibilities, they have some rights. We have a responsibility to not talk about their stuff in public, not to talk about their stuff in any way without getting permission from the patient, and not accessing information. You might be volunteering at a hospital and have access to some things depending on your job, your role there, but you should never access information on a patient unless that's your job. And of course, in that setting, then with the EMR, you don't want to share passwords ever. So patient, let's go to patient rights. They have a right to know about the law, to get a copy of their record and make corrections. This is a great piece I used to love in my practice. Towards the end, in Houston, we had a way for them to open up the chart. Everybody's got a My Chart now, right? But I've had several patients say, the technician wrote down, or my record says this, and so whether it was me or the assistant, whoever it wasn't quite right. And I'm always very appreciative, because we hear a word and we interpret, you know, we learn lots of doctor words, and so we exchange them out for what we think it is, and it may not be quite right. So I love that aspect of this. Could have been made a little, the sharing part could be, let's not go there. Let's do another talk another day. Patients can give permission to share the information and get knowledge about who and where and what you shared. And they certainly can file a complaint either with federal officials or the doctor's office. You need to be respectful. You don't discuss things. You do not put things on social media. Let me just say a word about that. Anyway, let's see. Don't use names or identifying information when you know, we all want to go home and share, but you don't share anything that could identify somebody. You need to be respectful and kind and considerate and honor your patients. I'm going to say something about social media. So I've actually turned off a person or two because the way they talk about patients in general is, I don't know, it's offensive to me. It was getting, for those in particular, it was getting really negative. And it wasn't complaining, it was like judging their behavior. Patients don't know. We're the 1%. you know, we've been patients. We have a beautiful grace of having an education and a calling to take care of people. And if you lose that and you're being cynical and talking about people in a negative way, please like wake up, somebody wake you up and think about that, because maybe you need a vacation or a regroup. And I always ask people to reflect back on this time, like this time when you want this so desperately, you want to help people in this way so desperately. Remember that, and then you would never talk ugly about them on social media. So just watch that. I think it's a reflection on the person. It's not, you know, you may be commenting on somebody's level of, what do I want to say, intelligence or something. And really, if you're going to talk in a derogatory way, it's a reflection on you. So don't do that. You know, be a better person than that. I love these little, just a couple of little scenarios. You walk into the patient's room and the patient has a visitor. What do you do? Well, you could introduce yourself to everybody and just start the discussion. You could introduce yourself to the visitor, ask them to step out of the room. You then ask the patient, would they like the visitor back in the room during this time when you are talking or examining? Or number three, and you can put your answers in the chat. Number three would be you walk in the room, or you can just unmute or hold up fingers. You can walk into the room, direct your comments only to the patient, and then begin your thing. Any ideas? 1, 2, or 3? What would you pick?
I mean, I generally, when I walk in, I'll introduce myself to the patient and then their visitor. And then I love it when they have like little kids or something, and then I get to like introduce myself to them too. And then generally we'll ask like what the patient is there to discuss, so that it's like them controlling what we're going to say and like where the conversation's steering, just so that it isn't uncomfortable for them when we're just like, oh, this is what you have, and like, let's dive into it.
Okay.
So
I
that
think
they
that's
kind of steer like the conversation.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to maneuver this. The answer, you know, if we have to pick one, which in all pre-med and med tests, you know, you choose the right, choose the best. And so it was number 2, to give the patient control of that situation. Now, it could be argued, Claire, I love that you came out with that idea for us. I like the idea. I think it works, obviously, but there are there's a devil's advocate out there who would say you don't ask the permission in front of the visitor in case they feel obliged in some way to say, oh yeah, my mom can stay. You know, somebody that might be a significant other or a spouse or your mom, and you're kicking your mom out. There might be some stuff there, some baggage. So one thing to think about is, does the patient need to be able to say yes or no without? And so you can say, can y'all step out? You know, can the guest step out for a minute? And then that gives the patient the control. And it has, you know, when you do the research, they have the right not to have this info shared, and it's caused losses of all sorts. I wanted to see what Ileana says. Is it sure? Oh, so I think that's a good point. If the organization is sharing, then they have the proper permissions in place for you to retweet or share. Absolutely. Thank you. Good, very good point. Very good point. And Camille, let's see. Yes. So so Sharon. Yes. Great. I think the formal is good. And then Sharon says, put your cell phone away. That was a slide or two ago. Really, it should be, if your phone makes a loud buzz on silent, like it needs to be off probably, because you don't know what kind of a serious conversation you might happen upon in that experience. And that you shouldn't be interrupting, right? So thank you for emphasizing that. A lot of the rules go for volunteering. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right, back. So scene number 2, a friend of yours has a family member in the ICU where you volunteer and asks you to check on the patient. What should you do? So Claire, you want to go now? Do you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
had a question. I don't know
Oh,
if
sure.
you touched on this because my Wi-Fi cut out.
Oh, okay.
But for visitors that might be either physically disabled or elderly, is it then also encouraged to have them leave the room? Because it might be a taxing event for them to have to like leave and then come back.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a very good point. And that's why we have guidance, but not, I think we probably have this guideline infracted. Is that a word? I think there are infractions all over the place in this particular area because we just forget and we figure you came with this person, we assume, I think in most cases, we assume that you want that person in there. I have had 3 or 4 patient encounters where I didn't feel comfortable and I wasn't sure. So I pulled the patient out for a test where I could ask the patient, are you comfortable being in the room with the others? And actually in 2 of those, the answer was no, thank you for bringing me out. So you just need to pay attention, but that's a very good point. We want comfort for everybody and we want privacy for the patient, right? So you've got a friend whose family is in the ICU and they ask you to check on them. What do? You visit the ICU, visit with the physician and ask about it. They tell you the prognosis is not very good and you tell your friend. You visit the ICU, ask the nurse what the condition is. He hesitates. And so you access the EMR. You relay this to the friend. You visit the patient to see for yourself and you review the EMR and then you relay the information to your friend. What do you think? Caitlin, are you answering?
Yes, none of the above. All
Yeah.
of these would be a serious HIPAA violation for multiple reasons in each answer. Yeah.
Yes. Good. So this is interesting, right? So I pulled these. I can't remember the resource right now, but they're from a resource who said that the right answer is number 1. Because I don't know. You don't know those family dynamics. And so I think that Caitlin's right. And so when I was reviewing this, I was like, how can this be? How can this be? Because really, if the patient is not able to give that permission, we don't know that they want their family member having that information shared with them. So I think Caitlin's right. And to play it, how do you comfort your friend then? Maybe here's one option is find the nursing station. A lot of places, if you call the nursing station, a lot of people attend to family requests for information and things, especially now that we can't have people with them in the hospital. So people will call the nursing station. And I think that you could help your friend with that kind of access, telling them what the access is. So that's a hard one. And you never ever access the EMR for someone who's not in your job description that you're not taking care of ever, even if you're the patient. I had a resident in Houston who got in trouble because her labs, they weren't getting back to her with the lab work. So she looked up her lab work and they dinged her for it. Now, I'll go in a little too far. And my response to that would be, well, you need to be faster with the lab info turnaround. But they made a note of it. So she had a little slap on the wrist. The last one is you're shadowing the OR. Everybody's taking pictures. So what do you do? Take a picture. Everybody's doing it. You take a picture for Instagram and only label it with the age, gender, hospital date, but not their name. make a mental note of the lesion. You could even draw a picture, something like that. Write down some of the details of the discussion after the procedure for your journal. So 3, right? 3 is the right answer. This has identifying information, the hospital date and diagnosis. So there are more identifiers than just a name. So never, never, all right. Oh, these little things right here are things that I'm going to give you. Okay, so now we're on goals. You remember the goals story, right? The Harvard, have you heard that on anything? That I love the story. I'll tell it briefly. In 1979, Harvard did a study and they took their new MBA students and they said, who has goals? Simple question. And like 84% said goals. I made it to Harvard Business School. I don't have goals. Goals, done, check. 13% said, yeah, sort of, I have some goals in mind with, I think I know what I want to do with this degree. And 1%, no, is it 1%? I don't know, tiny percent, a tiny sliver of the pie said, yes, I have goals. I've got them right here in my wallet. Here they are. I check them off. I make new goals. Well, they came back 10 years later to measure success with money. We know that those don't always equate. Maybe one tiny measure of success. The 84% were with their Harvard MBAs were doing great, making a nice living, feeling fulfilled. The 13% were making twice as much as those 84% of people who had no goals. The people who had goals, worked goals, made new goals, they were making more than 10 times the other 2 groups combined. So we should all be goal setters. When we write our goal, I'm going to go work on my calendar. When we write stuff down, we go do it. I'm going to put Jim on the calendar. Vanessa, ask me tomorrow, did you put Jim on the calendar? So because when we have it as a part of our day, a part of our path, a part of something that we look at every day, we achieve success. So I'm going to talk about goals. Let's see. Yes, interesting study, right? I know. Well, yes, you can make daily goals. You set goals for the long term. Your apprenticing goals for the long term could be, I'm going to find out about different specialties and systems. For the short term, you've got all kinds of things that you can set goals for on a daily or weekly or monthly base, shorter term, knowing the specialty, looking up things in advance, things that you observe. You want to take a notebook, you want to take notes or take note, but you can't be distracting with your note taking. That goes for doctors too. That goes for I think we say that in the interviewing presentation too, when we talk about interviewing, that interviewers sometimes can take notes in a distracting way. And your goal should not be choosing a specialty. I have for you 17 categorized questions to ask yourself to set goals. You know the Student Doctor Network thing, like don't expect much? Here, you can expect tons, but you have to put into it, okay? You have to work it. So anyway, and then there's another one of like those are categorized, and this is a general debrief. So you can come home and ask yourself, how would I describe the interactions that I observed today? Are there specific positive examples that I recall from this encounter? These are just the general ones. Were there observations that made me uncomfortable? Describe the ways the doctor communicated with the patient. Did the patient and the patient's family seem to understand? Did the doctor seem to understand what the patient was communicating? So simple to be used. What was the tone of this encounter? Was it happy, caring, superficial, sterile, clean, focused, arrogant? You know, so that's a nice one. So Vanessa and I are going to figure out a way to share with you some of those things so you can set very specific goals, and you'll think these will get you to thinking about other things you might want to list as goals. Do not walk into a cardiologist to do apprenticing and not have looked at the anatomy of the heart. Okay, simple. You're a pre-med. You don't have to know like all of the medical school or fellowship level anatomical points, but you need to know there are 4 chambers and who pumps where and what are the big vessels. And you might look up common disorders, common treatments, surgical and medical. Okay. What are the things we always ask in a cardiology office? What is the thing we always ask in a pediatrician's office? So whatever, it's not to delve into the specialty, it's to get the most out of that encounter and the most about medicine, no matter what the specialty is. Okay. So those are some goal ideas. Do not sit, do not lean on the wall, do not yawn, do not put your hands in your pockets, okay? Because in that demeanor does not tell us you are engaged, okay? No hands in the pockets. Engage, don't be a shadow. Listen and watch. You know, people who are engaged will hand somebody a tissue. I do ophthalmology, right? So people who are with me will grab a tissue to hand to the patient when drops are running down their face and I've forgotten, or they're tearful, or those kinds of things. When they're getting up, they will notice that the patient who was placed in the room before us, right? They will notice that the patient has a cane and they'll get the patient's cane or the walker to, you know, don't be frozen there. You can engage in any way that's going to help the doctor or the patient. And the more you go, the more comfortable you'll be. I understand being a little bit hesitant, but that's why you read the room and you read what's happening with your doctor. Be helpful and be alert and pay attention. And that's why you set goals. Watch for the unexpected. You know, if you will see sometimes people who are angry, people who are sad, a conversation between a doctor and a patient that is very serious because of the findings and need a serious kind of discussion. And you should really stop and pay attention to the lessons that you can learn. It's not very common that you'll be able to be in a room when a patient is when the doctor is telling the patient that they have breast cancer, or, you know, that they have found some serious thing, but you'll get to watch how a good doctor then always adds hope, brings hope into the room, and courage into the room for everybody, because there's a plan. Even if we don't know the details of the plan right then, they also bring their company, their presence, you know, that they'll walk with them in that difficult time. So pay attention to those, because those are particularly valuable. But other things to watch for: the language and communication, translating. Watch translating versus interpreting. There's a difference, right? We can translate the words, but what do they really mean? Nonverbal cues, patient and doctor understanding, and then all this goes in many directions, right? Office staff, the front office, the back end, what happens when you check people in and check people out, and system and tone. So a lot of those things, I think all those things are on these resources that we'll give you. And then you have to debrief, you have to write it down. Maybe you don't take a notebook with you in your pocket right then, but then sit down as soon as you can, get home, to jot down some notes. What was meaningful, nonverbal and verbal communication. You know, you can go in and say, I'm going to learn all the pharmacology today. Whenever there's a drug or a medicine, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to go look it up. I'm going to focus today on ancillary testing, and I'm going to look up all the tests that I hear about. So you can break it up into bite-sized chunks. That's on the categorized one. Okay. Reflect and write it down. Open your shoebox, write about it. And I promise, if you take that time then to reflect on things, your job of filling out that application in a meaningful way to convey to us the value of those experiences is really going to come across. What we've learned from COVID, I've got this other resource for you too. What we've learned, we put into 2 pages. The first page is from me and our committee. The next page is from applicants themselves last cycle, and what they did when all of their activities got shut down. So we will send that. One of the first things I mentioned to people doing, and a few people have taken me up on it, is studying an organ system. So say you just can't find too much to do in a room with a physician yet. You can take, set some goals. If Thursday was going to be your shadowing day, say, okay, every Thursday, I can't find it yet. So from 1 to 3 on Thursdays, I'm going to study the cardiovascular system. So go to YouTube, go to other resources online, learn the anatomy, learn how the anatomy relates to the physiology, start to look at a little physiology. You could do it for a day, but you could take a week or a month to do a system, right? On those, see what you can get done in 2 hours. You don't need to rush through it, but in a regularly scheduled, in a proactive way, to schedule yourself to study organ systems, you're learning about medicine, right? You can then get to a place where you're learning about treatments, medical, and what are those mechanisms of action for those medications? What's the drug of choice for these common disease entities? What surgical remedies are there? What are the most common surgeries? What are those indications for those surgeries? So those details are here. What are the lab tests I need to order for this? What questions do I make sure we include in the history when I'm talking to the patient initially? When you study something like that, you're not just surfing. This refers back to the personal growth plan things that we've talked about before. If you do things in a purposeful, systematic and scheduled way, now you can put that on your application. So we had people who did that. We had somebody who couldn't get shadowing, and they worked with patients as a volunteer, which I think is important to include. But for learning about medicine, they studied Gray's Anatomy, not the AY, not the network one, not the series, but the book, the iconic text, Gray's Anatomy. And when I interviewed him, he had gotten about halfway through. He was doing it like he was studying for a class. He did it with markers and notes. And he said, yeah, I said, I bet you're learning a lot. He said, yeah, I'm learning a lot. So it can be very valuable. But you have to tell us about the value. And we have to see that, that logged time there. Read a book by a physician. Again, systematic, all of these things, systematic and in an organized, proactive way. Read a book about medicine. I have some links in here that you'll enjoy looking at. Books by physicians are inspirational and informative. Don't forget the old guys. So my favorites from long ago are Oliver Sacks. He's a neurologist and writes do y'all know Awakening with Robin Williams, about the patient what did the patient have? Oh my gosh, can't remember, but the patient was in a coma and woke up for a brief moment. Anyway, it was a real neurological problem that Oliver Sacks wrote the book on. See, even the movie is too old, but anyway, don't forget some of the old guys. Richard Seltzer writes wonderful short stories. Help with tutoring children. At the time it was homeschooling, so I'm sure there's still some of that going on. Serve the community. And then a whole nother page of what people have done in healthcare and related areas, service, and in personal growth, okay, that made it to the application that we thought was valuable. So that's great. Claire's got some ideas. Sticky Notes, When Breath Becomes Air is a wonderful book. Everybody should put their favorite book in the chat. You could also, I say this in the personal growth plan thing, do the Great Masters courses and see if there's something that you could learn about research or healthcare in the Great Masters. I think it's $20 a month, but you can get a couple of people on that. And I think it's a good investment of $20. And TED Talks and book clubs and things like that. So remember, our time's almost up. Let's talk about any questions or anything you might have. We're going to find ways to give you the etiquette handout, the couple of shadowing things, the HIPAA course access, and the alternative activities that we just talked about. So, okay. What questions you can unmute? Oh, so Caitlin says House of God, old classic, a little irreverent. I think we have to always take things in an historical context. So we don't act like that a lot anymore, but I think it's an important book to read. It's a very good, I enjoyed it a couple of times.
I'm looking forward to it. My one of my friends who's a physician in Galveston that's my age, he says all of her first year resident friends still bring it up in the ICU that they're working in right now. So
yes.
I felt like it was a must read.
Yes, that's great. That's great. Really, yeah, old tome. This must be the 80s, must be the early 80s, I think. Maybe even 70s. Anyway, that's a good one for you.
I had a question. I
yes.
think it got kind of lost up in the chat, but I've
sorry.
been shadowing a physician, and I thought it was just going to be kind of like shadowing more like how I've been in the past, but she wanted me to scribe and take notes for her, but I was never trained as a professional scribe. So does that go down as shadowing hours, or is that going to be something different? Or are shadowing and scribing hours the same when you're applying? Okay. I didn't know if those were two separate things.
So I think the common factor and the essential descriptor is you're in a room with a physician who's taking care of a patient with maybe significant others there also, or not.
Okay, sounds good. Because I kind of was thrown into this from the vaccine clinic that I was volunteering at, and she's one of my professors, which also I think is a great resource if your professors at your university are also practicing physicians. Like one of my professors practices on Fridays, so I reached out to her and I've been shadowing her. But I was wondering if they were separate as far as hours when we apply, but everything goes towards the same hour set.
Yeah, so you get to name the title. So when you have other experiences, you could put shadowing. If you put apprenticing, nobody's going to know yet what that means, until we spread the word. But everybody knows shadowing, or whatever you're going to entitle it. Scribing is scribing. Usually people think of that as a job. You are employed usually, but not always. And so sometimes people bury it in the work section. You've heard me say before, go ahead and repeat that entry in the healthcare section as well. Okay. Back to student doctor network and not expecting much. There are some experiences where you're gonna be invited to be in a room with a doctor as an observer, and maybe the doctor never gets a chance to, maybe you are just standing there the whole time, right? And so it looks like a very passive experience. Maybe you don't, because the doctor is so busy, get to engage with the doctor in any kind of discussion before you go into the room or after leaving the room. That's why you need to take control and have active things that you're doing in here, or later, debriefing yourself when you don't have a chance to. For that reason, if we took the average shadowing experience, it might not be that valuable on the surface, whereas an average scribing experience, you're trained, you have a role on as a team member, in the care of that patient. So the average scribing experience might superficially have more value there. But you need to tell us about that. Okay. And that's why you can turn the average, maybe not so valuable shadowing experience into something valuable with all your goals and notes that you're going to take. Okay. Good. Claire, did that help you? And then Ileana's using Khan Academy. That's another great habit. Have a Khan Academy habit, a TED Talk habit, a Great Masters habit, all those things, great for personal growth, and can be related to medicine. House of God and Henrietta Lacks is a wonderful book. And Listen, Think, and Speak, another book. And The Band Played On came out in the late 70s, early 80s about the HIV. Very, very, very interesting study in the emergence of a life-threatening disease. Very interesting. A lot of us lived through that time, like you all are with COVID, and very interesting in the lessons that we learn about caring for people and caring for populations, communities of people are very important lessons. Valerie, that's a great question. Thanks for bringing it up. There are going to be medical schools who are looking for minimums, okay? We don't at Long School of Medicine, whenever it comes up in a process discussion, we don't have a minimum. I wouldn't recommend it, but we could envision a person who has a lot of related medical experience, except not as scribing or shadowing, but they know a lot about it. They have spent maybe minimal time. We can imagine a person who's spent a day or two. I wouldn't recommend it. I must say that 6 times. I wouldn't recommend it, but we can imagine that applicant having great motivation, good knowledge about what they're doing, and a heart of service, and maybe all of their activities are giving, and so we can imagine that. So we don't have a minimum, but there are schools with minimums, and that's why you have a section in your shoebox that says information on specific schools, and what schools requirements might be specifically. Good. Another book, The Finest Traditions of My Calling by Dr. Abraham Nussbaum. That's great. Thank you. So it's interesting. I would say look at the definitions in AMCAS. So we don't break out in the TMDSAS system. We don't label things clinical healthcare and non-clinical healthcare. In the AMCAS system, they do. And so, and what I understand from other pre-meds, when they ask me, there's somebody in the room who's maybe a little more knowledgeable about it, and they say that the clinical means hands-on, like you are a pharmacy tech, or you are a phlebotomist, or you're a patient care technician. All of those we would put into the healthcare arena, and we want you to tell us your interaction. Okay. And lots of people, so don't make us wonder about it. If you're doing hospital volunteering and you also then had opportunities with physicians, then you need to say that in the descriptor. I was hospital volunteering and transporting patients, but also had opportunities to engage with patients. So no worries. Bye, Claire. Any other questions before we close it up? Thank you all so much for being here today. Yes, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this, by the way.
Yes, you're very welcome.
It's more just a comment in terms of the shadowing experience. I think if everyone else could take away one piece of advice, I would say take notes after the experience, because I know that there have been experiences that I wish I had taken detailed notes, because in the moment we think, oh, this is very memorable. I'm surely going to remember this a year from now when I'm, thinking about applying. And then you don't. So if I could just really encourage others to write things down, because it gives you a better way to express how you felt about the experience, how it made you feel about the patient care or medicine in general. And I think that comes across probably better to you all on the admissions team. So, but I appreciate you doing this for us. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And that's a great point to emphasize, because when it's down, when you're even in 6 months, if you're applying in May, you lose the feeling is what we're after. The feeling, the meaning, and the value you're going to give us by telling you what that felt like. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to write it down perfectly, but you do have to try to give it a little depth. And it's much easier now. In May, you could sit, but you're going to have to sit for longer to recall all of that. So if you do it close to the activity, it's going to be.
And even maybe just one sentence might bring back sentiment more easily than you just trying to sit there and recall them themselves. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
very good. You're so welcome. Anything else? Everybody's very welcome. I'm so glad. Yes, Camille, hi.
If we were to try and kind of cold call, as you referred to it as an office or physician, to inquire about potentially shadowing, maybe saying that, I could shadow every Monday, Wednesday throughout next semester. I could help in the office if that is needed. I totally understand, putting it in a professional
Yes.
manner. I would work
Yes.
on how I would ask that.
Of course.
Is there a particular setting or I know that the understanding physician-patient interactions is kind of the goal, or at least one of my main goals in shadowing, but would like a family practice doctor be like more ideal because you would see more, or does that not really matter as much because we kind of just describe how it's valuable in our interviews?
Yes. So that makes a couple of good points. So I don't think it matters. I think that there are places where it's really hard to find a shadowing experience, and there are places where it's easier. So I would say grab what you can and make the most of it. If it's a primary care sort of specialty, I think that's even better. When people have shadowed me, even on a long-term basis, I like kick them out of the nest at some point because we're so specialized. I do happen to pull out my stethoscope quite a bit to take blood pressures and things like that, or to listen to carotids connected to the eye, things like that. But some experience would be nice if it was in a primary care, not so subspecialized, if you can. So if you have a long-term experience, and even if that's very specialized, I think that that's great. Let me make a comment about a variety of things. If you're only able to obtain experiences that are 2 hours here, 4 hours there, 6 hours there, another 4 hours here, it just presents a little better visually on the application if you just group all those tiny ones. Maybe you have 30 hours here or there, or 100 hours in something else, but those little ones maybe need to be grouped together. Okay, so I answered your question, I guess, right?
Yes, thank you. It's the art of medicine, so
Yes, that's right.
any insight is helpful.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Anything else before we say goodbye? You're all very welcome. I'll say goodbye now. Not sure what next month. We'll put next month on the books. It's not quite December, so this is a funny time. So I think right after the holidays is most likely, but as long as you remain on our email list, we'll let you know. And you can always email Vanessa and I to let us know what topic you're interested in, and we'll otherwise look up some things we think are interesting. Okay. We'll say bye. Got to unmute so we can say bye the real way. Wonderful to have you all here today, and see you next time.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
You're
you so
very
much.
welcome.
you.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.